Hello everyone, my name is Revd Prof Diphus Chemorion. I'm the Director of ECLAS Africa Hub here in Kenya, and also the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic Affairs at Pan-Africa Christian University. I am presenting on the topic entitled The Priority of Vegetarian Diet in Genesis chapter 1 to 3, Opportunities for Science-Engaged Theology. Since Charles Darwin's publication on the origin of species in the 19th century, creationists and evolutionists have engaged in a controversial debate on the origins of the universe, with either side opting not to listen to the other. The food motif in Genesis 1 to 3 presents an opportunity for dialogue and collaboration between scientists and Christian theologians. My attention is drawn to the priority of vegetarian diet, which is a subject of interest for both scientists and theologians. Whereas scientists and theologians process truth differently, a careful examination of the discourse on food in Genesis 1 to 3 reveals that there is more that could bring scientists and theologians together than what separates them. My thesis, ladies and gentlemen, in this presentation is that adherence to God's initial pronouncement on vegetarian diet holds the key not only to good human health, but also environmental conservation. For purposes of this presentation, I will retell the creation narrative of Genesis 1 to 3, discuss the vegetarian diet in the text, and highlight the theological and scientific themes therein. After God had created the universe, he created human beings in his own image and likeness from the dust of the ground. He breathed his breath into the man he had created, and the man became a living being. The Lord noticed that the man he had created was lonely, and so he decided to create for him a suitable companion. He created the animals and the birds and brought them to the man to name them, but none of them became a companion suitable for the man. So the Lord caused the man he had created to fall into sleep, cut a section of him, and used it to shape a woman who equally bore the image and likeness of God. Next, the Lord ordered the earth to bring forth vegetation consisting of different types of trees, which were beautiful and desirable for food. On the eastern side of the earth, he planted the Garden of Eden and planted in it different types of trees, including the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which were in the middle of the garden. The Lord also caused 4 major rivers to water the garden. Next, the Lord took the human beings and put them in the Garden of Eden to keep it and till it. He gave permission to the man to eat of every tree except from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because it would cause them to die. But the serpent, which was the cleverest of all the creatures, tricked the woman to eat of the forbidden tree. She plucked some fruits, ate them, and gave some to her husband, who also ate. The Lord noticed that the serpent had deceived the man and the woman to disobey him. He punished the serpent to crawl, the woman to experience pain in labor, and cursed the ground to produce thorns and thistles, so that the man would struggle in cultivating the land and finding food for the family. After this retelling, I would like to examine the vegetarian diet in Genesis 1 to 3. Vegetarian diet refers to food devoid of meat or seafood and may exclude eggs and dairy products. This is according to Healy 2017. Vegetarianism is the practice of living on products of the plant kingdom, with or without the use of eggs and dairy products, but excluding entirely the consumption of any part of the body of an animal as food, including chicken, fish, and seafood. A vegetarian is a person who follows such a practice. The extreme form of vegetarianism is veganism, which is a way of living that excludes all animal products from food, clothing, or any other purpose. In Genesis 1, 29 to 30, God provides plants as the source of food for both human beings and animals. In his wisdom, God not only created self-propagating creatures, but also put in place sources of nutrition for their sustainability. The centrality of vegetarian diet is captured by the requirements that every seed-bearing plant and every green plant is to be food for humans and animals respectively. Again, in Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 to 17, the prescription of vegetarian diet is repeated as the Lord decrees that human beings are free to eat from any tree of the garden except from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which was in the middle of the garden. Lastly, after the fall, God punishes man by cursing the ground to produce thorns and thistles, but still maintains that man would eat the plant of the field, albeit with difficulty. That is in Genesis 3:16 to 19. The practice of eating meat appears to have developed after the discovery of tools for hunting, as was a later development that came after the fall. It was also after the fall that human beings were permitted to eat meat, and we see that in Genesis chapter 9, verse 3, but with a caution not to eat blood, for it has life which belongs to God. The shift to meat consumption after the fall could be seen as part of the larger consequence of humanity's disobedience, as it is captured in Romans chapter 8, verse 22, where the whole creation was made to groan because of sin. And now to theological reflection on vegetarian diet. The priority of vegetarian diet in Genesis 1 to 3 suggests an ideal state of creation. Before the fall, God's intention for human beings and animals was one of coexistence, where human beings and animals lived in peace with all of them, depending on the plant kingdom for the source of food. This means that God's intention was to have a world of perfect order of creation without death, violence, and suffering. The later allowance of meat as consumption reflects a world defiled by sin and its consequences. It marked a move from the original harmonious creation to a more broken and violent ecosystem. This, however, is to be reversed with the coming of the Messiah, as foretold in Isaiah chapter 11, verse 6 to 9, where the wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard with the kid, the calf and the lion, and the child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, and the lion shall eat straw, and the child play on the adder's den. The vegetarian theme is a call for human beings to serve as stewards of God's creation. God gave human beings the power to subdue the earth and have dominion over the rest of creation, but this does not warrant wanton destruction of the ecosystem. Human beings were given the task of taking care, cultivating, and having a sustainable relationship with the rest of creation. The diet given to the human beings does not allow hunting and killing of animals. The vegetarian diet suggests a world where sustenance is in abundance without the need for destruction or death. It should also be noted that in the Edenic ecosystem, there is an implicit connection between the vegetarian diet and the absence of death. The consumption of plants symbolizes life, as there is no mention of death in the original creation. Both humans and animals live off plants which grow and regenerate, thus promoting life rather than taking it away. The narrative also presents an ecosystem where humans and animals depend on plants for food. This interdependence highlights the ecological balance that exists in the Edenic ecosystem, where all creatures live in peace with one another. And now to scientific reflection on vegetarian diet in Genesis chapters 1 to 3. In scientific terms, Genesis 1 to 3 presents primal ecosystem in which all species live in harmony. The human beings presented here fall in the category of early humans, scientifically known as Homo habilis or Homo erectus, who depended on omnivorous diet, which included both plant and animal diet. Their anatomy, including teeth, jaws, and digestive systems, suggests that they were more herbivorous than carnivorous. In the Genesis account, the human beings would be categorized as herbivorous, if not vegans. They were commissioned with a vegetarian diet, no eggs, no milk products, nothing that is outside the plant kingdom for food. The animals were brought to the man to name and relate with them. Man gave the names, but none was suitable as a companion. They were vegan. They did not only avoid eating meat, but even their choice of clothing was fig trees, and from which they made loincloths after the fall in Genesis 3:7. Vegetarian diet has its benefits, including less obesity, coronary heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, and cancers. They also have lower rates of illness and death from degeneration. It has been pointed out that reliance on vegetarian diet can present a risk of lack of essential proteins for body building and protection. This, however, can be mitigated by consumption of soya products. It has also been argued that plant diet is inferior to animal diet when it comes to iron supply in the body. However, the story of Daniel, in the book of Daniel, shows that dependence on vegetable diet is far much better than reliance on animal protein. The question of whether natural man was capable of carnivorous diet can be answered biblically. Unlike the teeth of carnivorous animals, human teeth is relatively ill-equipped to tear meat. The human only obtained the ability of eating meat after the fulfillment of the cultural mandate in Genesis chapter 2, verse 26-28, in which they were instructed to subdue the earth and have dominion over the rest of creation. This means that in the process of subduing the earth, man came up with the tools, which were then used to hunt and even to prepare a meat diet. This concurs with the scientific observation that the Homo erectus used tools for hunting and processing meat. The question is, when were the tools invented? Early humans likely did not live on meat alone. The discovery of fire to cook meat was a later development. Early humans were capable of eating carnivorous diet, but were not strictly carnivorous. They evolved as omnivorous, meaning they were equipped to eat both plants and animals. Meat consumption was an important part of their diet, but they did not rely exclusively on it. Vegetarian diet therefore points to a positive balance in the ecosystem. The provision of only plant-based food for both humans and animals implies an ecosystem based on herbivory. No animals or humans are shown to consume each other in the book of Genesis. Plants are necessary for sustenance of all living creatures, and this explains the need for environmental conservation through afforestation. In conclusion, I wish to point out that in the context of Genesis 1-3, the priority of a vegetarian diet represents the original perfect vision of creation, where peace, harmony, and nonviolence were governing principles. This ideal ecological balance was affected by the fall. The human discovery of tools and fire promoted the consumption of meat, but this was not in the original plan of God. In the eschaton, there shall be a return to the original paradise where human beings and animals shall coexist peacefully. Thank you, and God bless you.